Season 7, Episode 4, Cheap and Nasty, the Unintended Consequences of Workplace Interventions. This episode extends the discussion from Season 7, Episode 2 on workplace incentives. Thank you, Michael Grima, who shared a media report on paid Tinder leave benefits. You get paid to go out on a date? Alan marvels. Love me Tinder, love me Tinder. Trajce croons. I guess being in love is supposed to make you productive, Sara reasons. Listen to more of this episode. Send the podcast link to your friends. Download as many episodes as you like and subscribe. It's free. And please, if you have a workplace story to share, just send it through and we will unpack it for you. And if you're keen to organise a workshop or a special release episode in your industry, just let us know. Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast, a series of playful legal dissections on the most curious and alarming events in the world of work. The podcasters Alan Girl, Trajce Svetkovsky and Sara debate how to craft a better experience of work. Sit back, relax and enjoy. And remember, none of the things we talk about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. So you talked about in a reward system, like rather than being penalised, for example, demerit points, you would want to be rewarded for being a good driver or a safe driver. So, and we've talked about how some organisations could offer Botox booths. What other incentives do you think could be out in the universe?
For the record, I don't want the Botox booth, but you know.
Well, tell us something that you do want.
I know.
What do you reckon?
No. Well, hey, now that you said this, it's going to sound like I'm asking for this. So I'm just going to preface this. This is a friend of mine, Michael Grima.
Oh, a friend.
You know,
a friend of a friend. Oh, yeah, sure.
Friend of a
So you're just asking for a friend.
This is Michael Grima in Melbourne. He does some great visionary design work, and he's specializes in packaging design. But his design principles have been used in fact, in Medibank and projects like this and work dynamics. Okay.
However, Botox for me, a coffee voucher.
You're happy with coffee or Botox? Okay.
Yeah, I'm cheap and nasty. No problems.
Well, this is a workplace that will give you leave if you go on a date.
Are you kidding me right now?
Date leave.
Date leave, date night, date light.
Are you kidding me?
White line group. If this media report is correct,
What's the source? What's the source?
Channelnews.com.
Okay,
News, all right.
Hang on. You got to tell us.
Where is this? Which employers are giving?
Thank you, Claudia Poposky. That's the reporter.
Okay.
In September, she wrote that White Line Group in Thailand has announced that it will give employees paid Tinder leave.
Wow.
So if you explore
Tinder
dating
leave.
options on the app from July until the end of the year,
leave.
you get to be paid because we want to boost your well-being.
Can we just say for the record that we don't support any particular provider, but if you use Tinder and you want to comment on it, feel free to.
There are, I don't know, all the apps that are out there, right? App away.
So can you get Bumble leave?
I'm sure it's just, I don't know if it's app neutral.
Are they still around?
Grindr leave?
Right.
Well, why not?
Female staff in the company sitting around a conference room, the footage was showed, and guess what? The staff reacted with surprise and excitement.
Oh.
She took advantage of the plan, and she went on a date that very day.
Well, all I can say is this. Love me, Tinder.
Okay, but wait. There are so many
This is nuts.
It's not, so there are so many
nuts.
Tinder stories. Defense, what are your responsibilities?
That's an open. Yeah, that's right.
Oh my goodness!
Do not go. Yeah, that's right.
Right, there are so many.
But hold on, want some more detail? How many days per year do you get on Tinder leave?
Oh, let's see. Hang on.
And what happens if you're not going on Tinder?
Or any other platform.
The idea is that if customers find the one, their productivity and well-being will be boosted. It says customers, but they're talking about the employees.
Yeah.
Their research says being in love increases happiness, therefore makes your work more enjoyable.
Okay. This is just but forget all the legal.
That sounds lovely, though, doesn't it?
The fact that they're thinking
I can't forget the legal things.
See? innovation fatigue is certainly not a problem for that employer. They're thinking outside the box.
Well, what if it's Tinder fatigue?
Well, it depends on how many Tinder credits you get.
So it says it's a 6-month benefit. So does that mean it's only valid? Oh, yeah, from July until the end of the year. So go find your mate now. You got 6 months. Go.
So you've got well-being, you've got wellness apps. So hang on, you've got like wellness apps, well-being.
Then they're going to have all this. What if there's this wave of maternity leave after this?
It's possible.
You've partnered up.
You know what? I would have started with coffee vouchers or lunch, but geez, Botox and Tinder. That is really thinking outside the box.
It doesn't say how many days. It just says getting days and nights off. And also paying for your subscription. They pay for your subscription.
I would think so.
At a platinum level.
Does it say if any Australian company's doing it? Or is it just this one?
I only heard about this.
Alan's asking for a friend.
Michael Grima, if you're out there doing your research, Alan wants to know just for a friend, just hypothetically, how he gets Tinder leave. I mean, how a person could get Tinder leave.
Just curious. This is a curious podcast. That's just unreal. Like, see, this is great. Now, these are good incentives. It's really, at least these stories are starting the debate. So then back to your point, Sarah, rather than just mandating, you must return, talk about possibilities. They're endless. The infinite possibilities.
So, look, just before we close out, once again, I found a question that I don't know the answer to.
No.
Did you meet wife number 2 through Tinder?
Alan, your pathological obsession. I did not have a wife number 2. All right. What do you want to talk about, Alan?
So, Trajce, there's a prosecution that's been started by Comcare that's been reported in the media. It hasn't come to a conclusion again, so as I usually do, I'll just, we need to be careful that we don't know what the outcome of the court case will be. But in July 2022, there was a 9-year-old kid who went to the Department of Industry, Science and Resources Questacron Museum. And at the museum, being a good kid, there was hand sanitiser. He washed his hands with a hand sanitiser provided by the museum, and then went through the science display. There was a plasma globe, and he put his hands on...
Where it moves?
Yeah, where you put your hand on the glass ball.
And the electricity circuitry connects to your hand.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. And you do actually get a little bit of sparking outside the ball when that happens. And what happened was his hands caught on fire.
Oh, so the sanitizer was a conduit?
No, the sanitizer was the fuel.
Yeah,
it was an alcohol-based sanitizer, and it caught on fire, and his hands and wrists were badly burned.
Oh.
Just before you continue, Alan, just getting back to Sarah's very first point when we started today's session about is it an organisation or an employer expected to know every known hazard?
Yeah,
this
I don't
really
know that
hits home.
It's like a lot of events that are. It's easy to judge them after.
Correct.
The incident.
Yeah.
But before the incident, no one may have been aware that was a risk.
Oh, I mean, it's funny until you've made us aware. Would you have put that together? But then again,
unlikely.
I wouldn't have thought it would ignite. I could easily have made the same mistake.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Sanitizers are everywhere now.
By extension, what's if you were the dad doing it and you'd had alcohol-based aftershave? Your face could go on fire.
If you're planning to kiss the orb?
What if you kissed it? Well, no, what if you even rubbed the face? What if you even rubbing?
I suppose there will always be one.
There'll always be some fool. And then they get
see what happens with the electricity vibe as you kiss the side of the glass.
Pass this opportunity up. Have you kissed the plasma ball?
No comment.
Now, look, the thing is, this, though, before you continue, Alan, also reminds me of some recent decisions in relation to kids going to those jumping themes where they've fallen from height.
There's a lot
at the moment, there's a recent spate of kiddies being injured. Yeah. This is just another one. So the more things change, the more they seem to stay the same. We've got kids being crazy, kids being hyper excited, and then kids falling from height.
I guess, this orb.
Yeah.
I would want to know from the manufacturer, were those warnings there? Do they include that? Have they looked at anything that could be a conduit that could that could ignite?
Well, there's not a lot of information out yet, so we don't know.
Yeah.
It's also going to be one of those situations where the museum is going to have to, if it pleads guilty, it'll probably get a significant discount on its fine.
Because it's so.
But it's the sort of case where they might contest. It's
because there's a lot of interactive museums. It helps with engagement and learning, right? Again and again. But
yeah, you wouldn't want to see them closed down, but of course you want them to be safe.
But it does though. Yeah. So on the one hand, the reason why the hand sanitizers there is to obviously minimise the spread of germs.
Infection control, especially with interactivity. Anything interactive where you got your paws on everything, right?
So it's quite a curious situation. So you've got somebody with all the best intention putting something there, yet that intended product has a consequence which was completely, I would say unforeseen. However, it's occurred.
Yeah, well, it happens a lot where we see a hazard and a risk, and in endeavouring to control the hazard and the risk, we create a different.
You introduce a new one, right? You introduce another one that you.
Static. It's funny. Of course, you brought it to our attention now, but I wouldn't have thought hand sanitizer could cause anything. That could. I mean, obviously, if you put it in your eyes, you'd have stinging eyes.
Yeah,
but not
maybe an allergic reaction, like any lotion, anything topical. Right?
But
terrible case too for a 9-year-old kid. They'll be traumatised.
That's just
probably have a lifelong effect.
Yes. That is the most fascinating / bizarre cases that we've talked about in a while, because you understand if kids are at jumpy castles and then something's not secured or is inadequately maintained and they fall.
But so
this is different.
This wasn't just recent, so I'm thinking. If this was recent, I'm thinking, why did it only come up now? Would nobody else using the hand sanitizer?
It's possible.
Wait. Right?
Was it a new product?
Was it a new product? What's the?
Oh, that's the most curious thing I've heard.
I would be interested if you happen to see this final judgment. What the story is, the whole
curious.
story.
No, hand sanitizer.
If the case is contested, then we'll get a reasoned decision on where responsibility lies, and that could be quite interesting.
It's all right. Well, we'll watch this space for that one. I'm really loving that. That's not for the poor child who's sustained injuries. From a legal perspective, it's out there. Yes.
All right, I got one more case.
Yes.
Do you want me to go to that?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Trajce, there's been an interesting decision that's come out of the ACT, and I know from my own watching of what's happening in the world and cases that I currently have, that it's indicative of a trend. So what the case is about is there's a company in the business of selling metal products, including cables, and it was moving from one premises to another. It dismantled its racking, had 3 metre tall racking, moved it into the new premises, but didn't anchor the racking to the floor. On the racking, they would store drums of cables, which could weigh several hundred kilograms. Now, the incident that actually happened was there was a young 20-year-old worker who was serving a customer. More than 2 years ago this happened. And whilst they were serving the customer, some cable fell on that worker, hit them in the back of the head. They then fell and knocked their face on some other equipment and suffered very serious facial injuries. The mother of the worker was reported to have said that his face was unrecognisable. Now, that case resulted in a fine of the business of $375,000. But interestingly, this is the bit that I find interesting, is that the workplace site manager, who was also responsible for work health and safety of the business, he was convicted and fined $7,500. And so we are seeing a trend where those that are responsible for developing safety systems, where the safety systems are inadequate or not fully implemented, that they're being prosecuted for failing to do their job properly in putting in place those safety systems. And for our listeners who are employed safety professionals, and also for our listeners that are safety consultants, this is a growing concern. You know, they're being called to account where the safety systems that they're put in place or should have put in place haven't been effective.
Focus on, for example, employees or workers, and now consultants. It's sort of this downstreaming, and that's a curious development.
It's now I speak to safety professionals all the time, both employed and consultant.
Yes.
And very, very difficult because they're rarely given free rein. It's normally the employer might be difficult to work with because they don't want to put in place expensive solutions or don't want to have large amounts of downtime while the safety systems are put in place. Or maybe it can be as complex, particularly for an employed safety professional, where they feel they're being frowned upon and they, of course, want to please their employer.
Yeah. So
I hear about policies and procedures that are developed, and the person employed to do it has some strict timelines, and they're told from central office that your job is to find the citations that link to standards and guidelines, regulations, whatever. But in fact, I always say, well, hang on, isn't your job first to make sure that the policy or the instruction works? And if you're going to make sure it works, you need to consider its implementation from many points of view, and also how the communication is conveyed. Is it understandable? Can you actually make sense of it? If I'm the one receiving that procedure or that policy, does it make sense to me? Do I know what to do? Is it explained in a way, or are there visuals to help me understand this quickly, because I can't read dense language and really make anything of this. So the nature of the content, its distribution, how you transfer that knowledge so that you have actual, a knowledge transfer, a comprehension on the other end. And is it useful and meaningful? So in that case, I think of like, okay, what is it you're trying to do? Here at the University Trajce, since we're recording here today, have you thought about the person who cleans the university? Have you thought about the person who teaches? Have you thought about the manager? Have you thought about the student's experience and everyone else around you, right? So many points of view, because that policy is meaningless if it's just language.
Well, we were talking earlier in the day about the use of photography and how photographs can be particularly for workers who have poor literacy.
Absolutely.
Or even if you're just unfamiliar with the workplace. I love photographs. I think photographs can be very helpful.
So I work with XR companies, several XR companies, and there are some, and you've heard me talk also about colleagues at Real Serious Games, and some of their software, you can just take a photo. We took a photo of this recording studio right now, and then you can create icons, and they become a library of icons to say what hazard type. If you need to do a basic safety, what energy source and hazard type.
That's right.
And color code it, good old safety, green and amber and orange and red alerts, right? Narrate, in other words, speak. And there's so many software systems now convert speech to text, and boom, it automatically generates your report. So I just take the photo, it's visual, cloud-based, it's in a depository library. Anyone else that ever has to go into a recording studio can look at that if we had multiple campuses around Australia, right?
Yeah.
Boom, you can have a look and see if that applies, contextualize it a little bit, but you've already got an example, an exemplar. And it's just a visual risk assessment, maybe a couple of keywords, and you can listen to it or read it. So it then addresses your accessibility, your inclusivity, and diversity plans by having different ways of communicating that.
Even things as basic as where's the emergency stop button? having
Show a
photograph
photo.
of that, it
Yes,
means it's
but what,
easy to find.
But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
Alan was saying was, so for example, let's say that was prepared and done.
Yeah.
What Alan's saying is with the recent developments, you as that external agent, that consultant, you're being subsumed into that web of responsibility, not just for breach of contract, for being derelict in or negligent in for a civil standard. In other words, not doing a good report,
Yeah.
but being prosecuted.
I know. So
And that's scary.
Let me just ask you this. So if I was the advisor in that case,
Yeah.
whether I'm internal or external to the organization in terms of my employment law contract, if I had advice and I was told, no, we are not accepting that advice, document like crazy, does that protect me?
Maybe.
It certainly helps. What's even more helpful is, particularly if you're an external consultant, scoping your work
thank
and
you.
defining what's not in the scope
Yeah.
of work.
Yeah.
What is your frame? You scope it and you stick to that
I'm
scope.
going to tell you, though, a lot of employers, a lot of workplaces do not know how to articulate that design brief, and so much of that work is just getting what I would call a design brief. In other words, the scope that you're talking about
Demand
really
it.
clear.
I would demand it.
It's easy to say. It's easier to
I
say
know.
than do, because then the goalposts keep changing
Yeah.
and keep changing. And you think, and you've said it, and you bet it down. They go, but I thought you were also going to do this.
Yes.
And like, hang on, that's a whole. They don't understand the work that goes into each
Yes.
tangent, right?
That's a challenge.
If
That's
you
a
were
challenge.
engaged to document in safe work procedures or SWEMs what the process of doing a job is, then it would be important to scope out that you're not developing
This
the
does not
system of
include
work,
this,
you're
this,
just
this,
simply
yes.
documenting it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you're only providing this the scope, and you are not. So in
Yeah.
other words, you flip it and you say you are not, and then
I get it.
And so if even they come back later, it's saying you
I thought this was your job. Yeah,
manage it
yeah.
around. You just manage it around and say, well, no, this is the scope. So, but it's a curious development, and obviously what will happen is larger organisations, so the bigger consultancy groups will be able to sort of withstand any action. But I do
The
feel
little guy.
So I feel something for the little guy,
The little girl,
the,
the
you know,
little-
the one person,
Little person.
consultant doing their job. I do feel, that's an interesting trend.
Yeah, it's much harder for employed safety professionals because
Okay.
they're not in the position that they can write a scope of duties. You know, they're
that too.
they're there day in, day out doing whatever it needs to be done on that day.
So it sounds
sorry,
like
those employed ones, yes.
So it sounds like it's just easy to blame an individual, easier to prosecute, easier to get that across the line than to actually be robust in analysing the entire system of what permits, like I said, someone to do good work versus just mediocre.
Yeah, that does seem to be the trend. It's not a trend I like. I don't like the idea of blaming workers or blaming consultants. I prefer the focus to be on what can a business do to make workers safe.
Yeah.
And that's, but unfortunately, those concurrent duties, the act is
Kind of opened the door.
a multitude of defendants to be rolled out. And that is a concern. And it would be remiss of us not to talk about this. And if the solution is you ensure you scope in the best possible way and that you always exercise due professionalism, easier said than done because we're not doing the consulting, except Sarah. We hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan. And if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information, names of cases and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.